We have Emily joining remote too.
Happy New Year, everybody.
Oh, Happy New Year. We didn't realize you couldn't hear us.
It's like we've been forever since we've met, right?
Kind of has been.
Does seem like
Maybe early December. Did we meet after Thanksgiving?
I don't think so.
I don't
It
remember.
was town meeting and
Yeah.
did we meet after town meeting?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Wow.
think so.
That's been a while.
It's been a while, yes. I mean,
And we still don't have our ninth member, right?
no, actually was just thinking about that.
no applicants yet either.
No applicants? That's unusual.
That is surprising. If there were, we had, It's Sherry.
We're not the only two applicants.
I know normally there's multiple applicants and there's interviews and, you know, it's not a small thing to
Yeah.
get the next person.
And if people who are interested in other things, like this is
Yeah,
a better stepping stone than a lot of other boards because you get to know both sides of parts of town.
all right. I had this thing logged off. All right, we are past time, so I will call FinCom to order. So,
Roll call if we can promote.
oh yeah,
You do
Yes, we do.
probably, yeah, because she's on the phone or on the
that's right.
Zoom.
Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. No worries at all. Hey, Gene.
Apologies.
I think we are all 1, 2, 3, 4, only Joe, right? Is Joe on remote too, or is it just Emily? Can't tell.
It's Emily.
Just Emily, okay. All right, so we don't have to take attendance via roll call, do we?
For a hybrid, I think you do.
We do?
I believe that's,
Is that two?
It can't hurt.
And that's what other committees seem to be doing.
Yeah, but we're different, Jeffrey, but we're different.
we're not taking that.
All right, so what do I gotta go around present?
Yeah, just call the names and then.
Holy smokes, all right, here we go. All right, Jean,
Yes, late, sorry.
Jeffrey,
Here.
Joe,
Present.
Mark,
Yes.
Marianne,
Here.
Emily.
Present.
Ed is present and accounted for.
That was Joe Carnahan, present.
Joe Carnahan present, yeah, and we'll wait for Joe McDonough to stroll in.
The what?
I'll discuss it.
All right, so thanks, everybody. So hopefully quick meeting because this room is occupied in 52 minutes, 57 minutes. So we'll kind of rip through and do the agenda. I think the main thing is just getting the presentation from Sharon. Rather than just kind of going around the room, I'll just kind of open up liaison reports and see if anyone has anything that they want to share or need to share. Go ahead, Jean.
Really quick. The school committee has been having budget meetings over the last few weeks, and tomorrow night they're scheduled to have their public hearing, which is part of their budget process. So anyone who's interested might want to tune in for that.
Yep.
That's all.
Anybody else? Liaison report? Go ahead, Joe.
So I can't report back on it because they're meeting as we speak. The RMLD Board of Commissioners is having a joint meeting with the Citizens Advisory Board to decide on rates for next year. So, which is for many people, the most important meeting of the year.
Exactly.
I spoke briefly with Rec. I guess they're getting quotes for Birch Meadow Phase 1 and they're coming in higher than expected. So they're working through that at the moment.
Thanks, Emily. Anything from anybody else?
I think the only thing that we're
just to, everyone should probably know this with the select board and recalc that, I guess everything's sort of back on the table, but then I was just reading in the Chronicle that the Walgreens isn't completely out of the picture. Recalc did vote.
Oh, I thought it sold or something.
It's sold to a relative who's in the hotel business. They were looking at the other one, but Recalc did vote 7-0 to make it an intergenerational center. I happened to watch that meeting, so I don't know if that'll have a financial impact on anything we do in the coming year, but just to know the direction that they're going.
Thanks, Marianne. Welcome, Joe McDonough. So we are now in full attendance. Do I have to get to hear from him, or like, what's my protocol? If I just recognize him, is that enough?
Good.
Okay, good. Like these- these-
6 PM.
No, I don't like you two. I don't like you two guys sitting next to each other. There's too many rules. There's too much rule abiding. That, you two guys, we're gonna have assigned seats. We're gonna split up quorum in Carnahan. I can't have that. All right, so thanks everyone for the liaison reports. And the real, kind of impetus for the meeting was to get this presentation from Sharon and Fidel on the spending scorecard and financial forecast. So Sharon, we'll just throw it to you. And
Thank you, Ed. I just want to thank you guys for being willing to come out. I know this is highly unusual, making a change to an accommodated cost line item this late in the game, but we are trying to work very collaboratively with the school to try and get that full day pay funded in any way that we possibly can. And so we had learned from the superintendent that he found 250,000 within his budget. We had the 150,000 that we had as a community priority. And so Tom had reached out to Fidel and asked if we could find another 100. And so we scaled through our budgets, and the only thing that we could find was something related to accommodated cost. So when we have two rates in a given year, we tend to go with the higher of the two rates for the whole year, just to build the base up. And that tends to be part of our conservative style. We knew that the gas rate was going to be going up in May of next year, so only 1 month. But we had no idea at the time that we were presenting accommodated costs what that would look like, because we hadn't had any meetings with the vendor or anything like that.
so you didn't know the degree of
We didn't know the.
happened in May. Yeah,
we knew
gotcha.
that
Okay.
It was sounding bad. We just didn't know how bad it was going to be. So the
And then
number.
and what that would have looked like for a full year.
For a full
Because when you're doing that to be ultra conservative, you take that higher rate, but then you're extrapolating over 12 months.
And so we brought it up by 20%, thinking, well, at least it would bring the base up. So the next year, when we have this higher rate for the whole year, it won't hurt so bad. So we had about, I want to say, a 21% increase in that line item. So we opted to go and look at that and say, okay, really that money would go back to free cash, because only 1 month out of the year are we going to be at that higher rate. Later, we did meet with them to discuss that contract and realized it's going to go up like 36%. And so we said, okay, we could probably get away with this line item going down, a fair amount, and be okay for fiscal 24, and then allow it to go up what it needs to go up in fiscal 25, so that we're not just planning money to go to free cash, that we actually are trying to be part of the solution when it comes to full day K. And I know Mark had mentioned before, maybe we're just too conservative. We regenerate a lot of free cash. So we're trying to take some, we're trying to be a little bit more bendable here to try and get there, because we want it as badly as they do for them. And so as unprecedented as it is, we're looking to make a change to accommodate cost, bring it down. I think on the last page, you can see it's in the energy area. We made some adjustments, like I adjusted a little bit of my local receipts, not by much. There were maybe some small changes, but the primary line where the majority of the money is coming from is that national gas, because we know that only 1 month is affected next year. And it was really budgeted up so high to try to build the base up. We could probably afford to take that whole hit in 25 and still be okay. And so we thought that would be a way we could squeeze out the 100,000. So what happens to the budget is the way we do our budget process. If you remember in financial forms, I will project revenues for you, and then we project accommodated cost. And then what's left is what's split 66-34 between the town and school. this changes things because we had voted $3.28 million for a 3.75% operating budget. By making these changes, it gave, I think, about $117,000 more to the school and brought them up to a 4%, and also brought the town up to 4%. And we had some little things that were asked for, like the fire department needed something that was $60,000. It helped us fund a little of what we were looking for, of the extras that some of the other department heads on the town side wanted. Because whatever we cut was going to flow through to the school and the town at a 66-34 split. So whatever I cut, it was going to increase the operating budget of both town and school. So what we end up with is a decision for all of you about how comfortable you are with that 3.28 million staying for free cash and having us get a 4% operating budget because we changed accommodated cost. In the past, but an accommodated cost was changed late in the game, we normally would just reduce the use of free cash. That's our typical game with that. Like, we don't like to mess with things. We just like, okay, we'll just use less free cash. And we're still using the operating budget that FinCom approved. It's not typical that we come at you this way at the end. And so I apologize for that. But so our ask for you is, how comfortable are you with us making this adjustment to try and make way for full day K and, leave the $3.28 million of free cash for a 4% operating budget. The other thing I might remind you is in that $3.28 million of free cash is an additional $700,000 of capital. So it's not all funding the operating budget. That whole 3.28 isn't all operating budget. So I wanted to remind you of that because it's been a fair amount of time since we discussed, and then really open to discussion and questions about.
Thanks, Sharon. So I'll open up. Anyone has any questions or comments, and start the discussion there? I knew it. Go ahead, Derek.
I mean, I felt that we voted on the 3.28, the use of free cash, based on what we looked at in the balance in certified free cash was,
Yeah.
So much higher than our target. I felt we were voting on that number, and whatever else fell
They
out
kind
of
of,
it.
they
So
go together. It's like, okay,
They do,
give
but-
us this
but I
much
felt
money,
like
this much operating budget. And it
the
didn't
number
feel
that I
good to
was-
just change the operating budgets without having FinCom chime in and say, yes, we're still okay with that 3.28 for a higher operating budget.
No, I am okay with that because I thought it was based on, what we were taking out of free cash and where that balance stood. That's my perspective. on it.
Go ahead, Joe.
Very similar thoughts that I appreciate you coming back to us because of the change, but at the same time, the important thing in my mind when we voted in the fall about free cash was not the percentage increase that town and school were getting, but the free cash projection for the future and making sure that we were not spending that down at an unacceptable rate. So
Yeah.
that is unchanged by this. So I'm fine.
Go ahead, Maureen. Yep.
So I feel okay with this, but my questions would be probably something more that I'm going to ask tomorrow night of the schools, which is, okay, what we're giving them this year still isn't getting them to 100% full day K. And it looks like they're drawing down their full day K revolving account like a lot in the next year. So what are they going to be expecting in the future at this level? And is this sustainable to really get them to free full day K? Because, okay, we have a 1-year projection, our energy costs will go back up next year, and I don't know what else is coming. So I just don't know what expectation we're doing. We're certainly reducing the tuition, and maybe a reduction in tuition is sustainable, but getting to free, I guess I'm just wondering what the schools are expecting out of this.
Go ahead, Judy.
So I agree with everything that's been said so far. I had the same approach as both of you did, which is I look at it more as voting what is an appropriate amount of free cash. And if we get a reduction in expenses, I think I'm pretty comfortable having that reallocated to the operating budgets. That being said, I appreciate that Sharon reached out to the FinCom. I definitely think this is conversation, should it happen again. And I would actually be concerned about that too. I think this should be a very rare occurrence. So I would be concerned if it became a pattern. But when it happens once in a blue moon, it is an opportunity. And I think it's appropriate for us to discuss it. So I agree with you, but I also definitely wouldn't want anyone on the town side to take it as, just go ahead and if some,
Yeah, I don't
bring
I
it
don't
back to
love
us.
the
for
idea of doing it
discussion.
that way. It makes it harder because if it kind of puts a pressure on you to say yes, and then they're going to have to go back and change everything they've done. You know what I mean? It's really not the way.
I'm not afraid to do it though.
We don't like to back into things. It's not the appropriate way, but it helps
Yeah.
them. And
Yep.
we've been trying to work really hard to be collaborative, to be supportive, to try and get them there.
And given the numbers you're showing, you are clearly working very hard on both sides to get there. But I 100% agree with what Marion just said. One of my questions here tonight is I actually want to make sure we're not going to zero because I have a complete lack of clarity on what the plan is to sustain no tuition down the road or even this lower tuition down the road. As long as we're lowering tuition for a year, the fact is you can adjust the tuition or you can make other cuts. But when we go to zero, when we actually make that decision, we have an absolute obligation to understand how that's sustainable. And I don't think we're there yet.
We're certainly not there. Yeah.
Right.
They're not going to zero. They're certainly going down,
Yep.
but not going to.
And their enrollment is still down and projected to be down. So that's kind of what's saving them because they don't have as many. I mean, they're down 800 kids from the peak enrollment 10 years ago. So their out of district costs proportionally are lower. What I've seen in the budgets is there's a lot that's a lot lower. And so maybe there'll be lower amounts of kindergarten kids, but yeah, getting to zero. It's
Right.
still,
I mean, they had asked for us to get there within like a 3-year time frame, and I was saying, well, maybe if we're lucky, I can do it in 4, because the original plan was to say, okay, we'll do an accommodated cost of 150 to start the budget process, 150,000. And then if we have additional new growth in November, I'll give you another 150, and then you can reduce the support coming out of the revolving fund, and maybe over 4 years we'll get there. So this is speeding it up, but who knows what we'll be able to do next year?
Right.
I mean, we're looking at,
we might not see the same level of construction beyond what's already in process right now.
but whatever we could squeeze out, we're trying to get
Yeah.
for them. I mean, if they have to be, seeing an effort on our part, and we see an effort on their part, we're trying to do everything we can.
If I can ask a follow-up question. So what is the plan for the gas line in 2025? What is our ability to absorb that? It looks like about
So it's-
125.
Yeah, so as you see, looking at I think it's the last page shows you detail. In the energy area, which is section E, is where natural gas would show up. It's under energy. So we are going up 4% in this current year, knowing that will get us to, what we need for that 1 month, that 36% increase, and then another 33% in fiscal 25. So, and we're still able to, with the way this is working out, do a 3% operating budget next year if everything works out as it is right now. Things change, we learn things, if health insurance were to come in a big number or whatever. So I think this is going to be an interesting first year, this year, that doing this is something different that we've never done. And I think we'll see in regeneration of free cash, if any of our moves really had a major impact, and maybe we will be more or less conservative next year. So we'll probably have to adjust our game plan accordingly, depending on what we see, what we know is coming forward. And, we had learned about electricity going up, like RMLD had given us the heads up that they were expecting to do an increase. We tried to bump up electricity. We're trying to stay ahead of it. The other thing is in the accommodated cost, there's always a little bit of buffer in certain lines. Like I feel like I keep the buffer and add a little bit. So I increased it by 4%, but there was excess there from last year. So we're not as tight as you think. And I'm hoping, as we learn more information, when you're looking at budget to actual and see how things actually pan out, are we trending higher, lower? Any of that stuff that we can adjust accordingly. But we're plugging in a 33% increase there, and we're still able to balance, which I think is, I'm baffled.
I'm a little baffled. Can I ask one more follow-up?
Of course.
Thank you. I had a question about the vocational ed line, which I
Yep.
can't find right now.
It's the
Vocational is the H.
page.
There they are.
So we have the 200,000 plugged in there that starts in.
That was exactly my question. So it's an FY '25 that we see the big bump up from the construction project.
We've already got it in there, yeah.
So that's already accounted for.
So if we learned it was going to be more than that, we would definitely have to make adjustments. So that's why we always start with the accommodated costs. These are the things that we agreed between the town and the school we would make sure get taken care of before we start splitting the money, out of district special ed, energy, veterans aid, vocational schools, all that stuff. And so that's why we try and look at those first and see where, and we almost always are going to know what our debt's going to be because we've already got it out there, so some of these are easier than others when it comes to things like the natural gas where we had a contract expiring. We really kind of were guessing when I was presenting it to you and giving you like a higher number because that's what conservative people would do. And also knowing that next year I thought, well, Jesus, it's going to be as bad as they're talking about. I don't want to hit for 33 or 40%. And, I wanted 2020, like 20%. And
Absolutely.
so, but in truth, when you really think about it, that money surely would have gone back to free cash, or we would have reassigned it somewhere else at a later town meeting as we had access. So I feel like it's fair to try and squeeze it out there for this.
I am so sorry, one more.
Keep going.
I want to just ask about the debt service, which falls off a lot in 2025. Those lines go down a bit. And that's my last sort of specific question about big moves in 2025. So if you could talk a little bit about what's going on with the debt, why is it dropping so low? I think it's some, it's building projects that are falling off.
As projects falling off, the excluded debt goes away.
And so my only question is, so other than, I see the Vogue School, I see the debt falling off, are there any other big things on the horizon for FY23 that we should have in our minds as we make this decision? So I don't want to
23?
take this FY25.
Good.
I don't want to take this
You think?
slow and then sort of find out that like, oh, it was the building project we didn't account for.
I mean,
or-
Well,
I don't know where we're at with anything related to the senior center or anything like that.
Included, I should, yeah, within the levy. I'm not including excluded because that's
There you go.
automatically funded.
Yep.
I'm so sorry. I meant like.
Okay, yeah.
I'm
I
so
can't
sorry.
think of anything else that, there could be a surprise, but nothing's coming to mind.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
Can you think of
I hate
anything?
to be the Debbie Downer, but
You know something
trash, right? So trash is
in 23?
no, trash is
For
going to be
long-term
FY27.
Okay,
So it's our contract is up to through calendar year 2026. So it's not even in this chart, but when we had the trash situation, I'll say we requested a quotes and I'll say that the contract that Reading signed in 2016 is phenomenal. I mean, it is absolutely a windfall. So anyone that was involved in government, well, back then,
John?
it was great. Absolutely huge win. We think that it's going to be, so right now we pay about $1 million in trash, roughly. It's going to be about another million, but
So it's going to be a huge increase.
it's going to be a huge increase, but in FY27. So
It's not
and
affecting us
not anytime soon, but it's something that
we have to plan.
it is going to affect us in the future.
When, so Sharon, this, like, on that point specifically, and other ones that are like that, like, how do you start to highlight that? And when do you start to highlight that so that there's, like that it's on people's radar?
So what we tend to do when we're starting this process is to reach out to the specific department heads who are in charge of the areas where we have our accommodated costs, so facilities, and they have their contracts, and the question would come up, when does this contract expire? That we
Gotcha,
have to
okay.
ask, when does this expire? When do we need to be renegotiating this? Now, I think the town manager would know better than I, because he's part of the conversation more often than I. So I'm getting involved more and I'm getting more familiar, but that would be how I would learn, is asking the question of the department head. Because they're going to know a lot more about the details of these individual line items than I would. I mean, I will be able to see budget to actual, how we're trending in the current year and things like that. As I see things changing, I could ask questions. When we're building the budget, I'm really looking at, do we have a contract in place? Is something going to be negotiated? What are you hearing from other towns? Those kind of conversations are the kind of conversations we have with the department heads that control the areas that have accommodated costs at the beginning of the process. And in this year, it was a little bit kind of wonky because I'd done it first by email and they were like, oh, okay, well, we normally met with, Bob. And so we ended up getting together all together. And saying, okay, let's talk about your sections. And did I not increase this enough? And, is what I've got there for an increase for this line item seem to be sufficient for you? And that's the kind of conversation that we would have. So we could miss something. We always could miss something. That's human nature, but I think we try really hard to communicate well and to collaborate with the key parties so that we don't miss.
Then just on one of the mentions. So when does the process begin, date-wise? Like, when do you start that?
So financial forum is usually in October, so we would usually start talking about it sometime in September.
That
late
interim.
September, yeah.
Yeah, okay,
So leading up to your first financial forum, we would start having those conversations.
perfect. Let me get Joe first.
Yeah,
You-
absolutely.
You've hogged it, James.
Totally.
We're gonna get Joe now.
Yeah, well, first to the prior discussion, I'm fine with the changes, so thanks for all the clarity and transparency. My question is more like around some of the 23 items, like the other local revenues.
Yeah.
They seem more like, call it optimistic, right?
Yeah.
Is that how it's looking to date, Sharon?
So a lot of times when we're doing this, we're looking at the actuals for the current year and how they're trending, what we saw in the prior year. So there's a lot of things that go into what we're doing, and we seem to be each year having record high regeneration numbers. So it's trying to make that adjustment, you know? And there are definitely items that come in that help us with regeneration that we don't budget for, that seem to, like, there's no place to put them. So like, there's a little bit of wiggle room in some areas. Areas that, like, we see every year that we tend to have something is like motor vehicle excise. No matter how much we adjust it and think that, oh, it's going to go way down, it ends up surprising us. So we're trying to make adjustments based on what the trend looks like for the current year, what's happened in the last 5 years, and try and figure out what is the rate of increase we're seeing. And if it looks like we're being a little less conservative, we're looking to do more with the money, you know? So I think we're trying to maybe tweak just a little bit, but, and then if we don't regenerate at a level that's adequate, then we need to get back to a different style, a more conservative style. But we're trying to, you know, work in and operating a budget that's very inflated. All the prices are inflated. It really was a hard budget to do. So you do find yourself pushing a little bit harder on, well, I regenerated this much, you know, revenues. Maybe I'm overly conservative on some of these lines. I should bump them up a little bit. So, and then the other thing that you're going to see is we're seeing more recovery to pre-pandemic levels, what revenues might have looked like had we not had the pandemic. So we're getting close to where we would have had our projections had we not scaled them all back and tried to put them back slowly. So it may look a little bit more optimistic, but it's really more in line with what we would have seen prior to the pandemic. Now, who knows how things are going to play out? Inflation the economy does not look great. So, you know, we'll adjust accordingly.
So,
No,
good fish, yeah.
sorry. But like something like interest earnings, right? Like, I guess that's just the money we hold in cash, right? We have
Yeah,
cash that we're getting interest on, right? And that's going to obviously go up, right?
the interest rates are going up, you know, dramatically. We were seeing, I mean, there was a point where we were getting over $1 million over projection for interest earnings. And then all of a sudden during the pandemic, everything plummeted. And that was a line I had to take way down. Now that interest rates are rising, we're negotiating better rates for whatever we're investing in, whether it's cash at MMTT or CDs or whatever we're investing in that's allowable for the treasurer to invest in. We're seeing better returns than we have in the last 3 or 4 years. So you're going to see the number bump up dramatically.
How much would we have to invest? Like, how aggressive can we be with that? I'm just curious.
The treasurer has to abide by the prudent investor rule, as she has limited investments that she's allowed to invest in. And, she's not able to do the kind of things that PRIT can do for us with our pension funds. She's not in there in the stock market. There's not, because the money can't be out there invested and tied up like that. So it's very limited what she can do in investing, and she can't compete with the kind of things that you would get if you were investing in a PRIT or something like that. It's really maybe like 2 or 3% you're talking about where she could gain, and whereas we could be at 8 or 9% if we got money at PRIT. So it's hard to compete when you've got a limited list of things that they allow you to invest in, because are considered safer investments because it's public funds. They don't want to risk you losing public funds. So there's a very limited list, but where interest rates are higher, safer investments are paying a lot better than they had.
So I don't want to lose sight of one of the things that you were talking about, Joe, and I'll throw it back to you. So on free cash regeneration. So am I thinking about this, and should our expectation be that given this piece on accommodated cost, that the regeneration from that line item might be dampened. You know what I mean? Like, like that we to expect that, like, so if you break it out, and I know you break this out, like, or our total regeneration this has come from conservative estimates on revenue and then, and then aggressive, cost items.
Yeah.
So if you're looking at it from those two levers, the cost one may be a little bit, you might not get as much out of that from a regeneration perspective. The revenue ones are still, kind of yet to be determined. Is that
Yeah.
kind of the right mentality?
I feel
that we
like
should have, or
In this inflated environment, I feel like when I did the projected revenues, I think I'm a little less conservative this year than I was last year.
Okay.
But I'm saying not a lot, especially when we're seeing over the last 3 or 4 years, record regeneration in revenues and expenses. So I'm trying to capture more of that revenue and do something with it.
Yep.
If it proves to not work out, we will go back to what we were doing before and be ultra conservative. So we take to heart the idea that we stand in the way of doing other things. We want to be somewhere in the middle where we're in a nice spot where we're doing everything that we can to get everything done that needs to get done for the community, and we're building free cash. So we're trying to be somewhere in the middle and not overly conservative so that we're getting $4 or $5 million of regeneration when really, we could have done something else with it.
I mean, I think from, and just from my,
Last year was almost 6.
Yeah, almost 6 million last year.
yeah, so I think from,
I feel like I'm trying to scale it back to make the correction of what we're seeing.
and I'll give it 1 second, like, from my perspective, I think that, it was fine for us to embrace the ultra conservativeness, especially during the pandemic. Now that we're coming out of it, we're also more aware of community needs. And again, Gina and I were just talking about this the other day. We have no authority to tell anybody what to do. But I embrace that philosophy of trying to get as much out of the budget to address as many community needs as possible. There will be, there's always a day, that's, hopefully far off in the distance where, there'll have to be some kind of reconciliation because we'll start to draw down, kind of free cash at some point in time. That's inevitable. But I don't think it's prudent to try to stave that off as long as humanly possible and negate needs that we're starting to identify that, again, I think are heightened because of the pandemic.
This is just a point of clarification, but I think it's an important point. The excessive regeneration we saw this year, I think, was largely due to federal grant money coming in and taking over.
There was some piece of it, yeah.
Yeah, I just wouldn't want anyone to perceive like, oh, the excessive regeneration.
But
is
if you
we're
look at
so
prior years
conservative
and
in
before
budgeting.
that, like,
Yeah.
I feel like our average is like $4 million.
Yeah.
It was 6 million the year before as well.
I just think the last 2 or 3 years with COVID, with excess federal funds, with significantly less costs in some places,
Yeah, it's hard to know.
I would be really nervous about looking at the last 2 years and saying, oh, those patterns are probably going to continue. Probably not on both sides, on the good side and the bad side. I just want to caution.
What I
against
will
that.
say to you is this, as we prepare for April town meeting, November town meeting, we're always looking at where we are with our revenues compared to what we projected them to be. And if we feel like there's a need for an adjustment, like we're going to do that. Like if we feel like we're not going to make our revenue projection, you would see us ask. I think that I've only, in the whole time I've been here, I think we've only asked once, and it was during the pandemic in water and sewer, and we ended up not really needing it, but it was so tight. We just asked because revenues, I think it was during the pandemic where they had that moratorium where they, we couldn't charge any kind of late fees or anything. And so people were late to pay. And so the money wasn't flowing in at this, at the same times as they normally would. And as we approached the end of the year, we hadn't collected all of the revenues yet. And it made us nervous as we approached April town meeting, asked for more free cash to make sure that we could get through. And then it ended up going right back to free cash. So we are always kind of looking, especially when we have opportunities like subsequent town meeting or April town meeting, to make adjustments to the existing budget for the year. If we see that we're off the mark, things are trending totally differently than what we had hoped.
Yeah, and I think that that just makes the execution for you and for both of you and the rest of the department heads to there'll be times where the pencil will have to be sharpened, and the line will be drawn a little bit higher. Because I just think for us, there's certain indicators and measures that we need to keep sight of. And I think free cash regeneration is one of them. Those are indicators that, maybe we might be doing, the pendulum might swing too far the other way. And so I just think we just need to make sure that we're keeping that balance, that, we're not trying to do everything for everybody, but then also, but not hoarding every dollar as well. Like there's a middle ground. And I think, but I think it's important for us to know what those data points are so that we know, okay, well, maybe it's time to course correct a little bit. So
Absolutely.
my 2 cents there. Joe, I stopped you. I don't know if you lost it. My hope was that you were going to lose it. So if you did, no, I'm just joking.
That you're going to lose it.
Yeah, hopefully just a couple of very specific questions on, for public service expenses, right? Just a couple of these large deltas, right? So that 15.9%, like say that H92.
H92.
It's on the first page.
On the first page, I'm sorry. The spending scorecard, yeah.
Yes, what's public service expenses again?
Page 92, where am I? Oh, public services is, used to be called community services. So that would be community development, economic development, all the things.
But also,
recreation.
wasn't that when there's one thing that went from wages to expenses?
Yeah, so
Shared?
that was in FY '23. So we had a person that did affordable housing basically, and it was in labor. We went to a contract situation, but that's not. So the H92, the 15%, while it seems like a large percentage, the dollar amount isn't.
It's not that much, yeah.
And basically what it is we are hearing the need to fund the senior center more aggressively, I guess I'll say, senior expenses. So we added essentially about $30,000 in that line to absorb what we think is going to be in the future. Right now, we don't need any money for the senior center. The $900,000 that was given by ARPA is going to last us a few years. But we are hearing and mostly from the Council on Aging, right? That we should build up the expenses related to the Pleasant Street Center.
So is that funding for like a rec or for more programs?
That is for more programming,
Senior
It's expensive, yeah.
citizens.
It's not for salaries. It's just programming.
No, because I definitely support that. I remember that from, RAC, but do we think we need it this year though?
The
Budget or?
I think so. So when we come to the budget to FinCom in March, I think it will be a good idea to give you a sense of where we are with regards to ARPA spending too. That line in particular is one to talk about. So we I feel like we are in a good place in terms of how much money is available from ARPA funds for senior center. I don't think we need it. We will not likely need it because we have another fund, another way to draw from. But it's something we wanted to build up so that when the ARPA fund runs out, it's not like we're pointing fingers.
But isn't that area too where the regional affordable housing coordinator is? So like we're moving it from what used to be wage to expense. Right. So in those numbers is actually moving something that was part of our wage number and putting it in expense because it's now contract as opposed to a salaried employee.
Can I just follow up with what he said? So if this is kind of a placeholder amount that you want it to be a known dedicated budget amount when ARPA runs out, if ARPA was more than enough in FY '24, does this get spent or get returned to free cash, but it's still a line item? So we remember
Go back to free cash if it doesn't get
exactly.
spent. Anything that doesn't get spent goes back to free cash. So if they use the ARPA funds first and they don't end up using any of this, it would go back to free cash.
because they have to use that ARPA.
Can't go.
That's usually the way that the order people would spend it, grant funds first, yeah.
But ARPA can't go to free cash, right?
No,
No.
it has to be spent by the end.
Tried.
That's like an express,
Yeah.
an express first thing.
I
we
want to go
said.
to jail, me.
Yeah.
Wait a second. Did you have something, Gina, or is that the same question?
No, Marion may ask a question. Actually, I'm good.
Okay, one more, Sharon. Hopefully this is another easy one.
What's your limit, Joe?
I know, sorry. Sorry, just like the big, another change, like the core facilities, like that increase.
Just the gas.
The 10.7.
The gas is in there. So all of the increase like of electricity, gas, all that, even though they're accommodated costs, they're part of the core facilities. So anything related to maintaining the buildings, the utilities for the buildings is going to fall into that core facilities line, which is also bottom line. So it's salaries and expenses. But what you're seeing, that expense, that increase of 10.7 would be largely due to the increases that we put in there for electricity, water, even the gas, and then also anything related to pay contracts and stuff like that. So it's everything, but you can see that facilities has a lot of accommodated costs. They're dealing with the gas and they're dealing with the water, and they're dealing with, all of that. And so there were a lot of adjustments made in that area because energy costs were up.
Yep, okay, great, thanks.
Emily, anything for you? Our view doesn't show you, so I just want to ask, not to put you on the spot. If there isn't anything, no problem.
No, I really appreciate the transparency with which, both Fidelity Chair and have handled this. My only thought is just, this was my first budgeting process, but I was looking at it kind of the way Joe C said. I was looking at it more, what's an appropriate amount of free cash that we have to put down. I just want to make sure in the future we're not saying, oh, well, we did 4% this year, let's bump it to 4.5 and, kind of snowball that way. So I think if we just look at it holistically in the future, I just want to keep that in mind. But this has all been great, and thanks for all the thoughtful questions and the answer, Sharon.
Thanks.
Thanks, Emily. Richie?
I apologize. There is one assumption on here I wanted to talk through a little bit, and it's future free cash use. So,
Where do I have that? On the front page, right? Okay, the second page.
oh my goodness, and now that I want to talk about it, I can't find it. It's on the second page. So the assumption seems to be that moving forward, we're going to increase our use of free cash.
I guess it does look that way. I was looking at it like in fiscal 25, we actually have 750,000 for the extra capital. But I thought that we had talked about, like I was trying to scale us back, and I thought that you had guided us to try and keep it at a certain level to keep the operating budget. So I felt like the increase wasn't that great. If you do have issue with it, we certainly can look at it and scale it back. But I was looking at it like, okay, we've been using 3.28, we're trying to bring it down, and so in total, it's still down, and where the, the capital piece falls off, the extra capital cost that we were trying to capture to keep us going with the inflated prices, I felt like, okay, well, we could still get this to a 3% by using a little bit more free cash. So I made some assumptions there, but obviously as we're building those budgets, you guys would direct me in where your comfort level is. Yeah.
Thank you. I hadn't looked at the extra for capital, and I appreciate that you spread them out. That actually answers about half of my questions. So we're currently using, without the capital, about 2.6.
Yes.
I think this might be a question more for the committee
Yeah.
than for you, but my perception personally, when I voted this level of free cash, is I was comfortable with it, but my preference would be to hold it steady. Because every month as inflation goes up, that amount stays the same, and it actually becomes a smaller percent of our budget. So it becomes corrected. If we take the free cash that we use to support the operating budget and every month increase it by 2.5 or 3%, I understand the thinking of that, like, well, the budget goes up 2.5, increase free cash by 2.5, except then the cliff that you build, which is eventual, 3 years, 5 years, 15 years, nobody knows, but you do hit it. What everybody knows is you do hit it. If we're able to maintain a constant dollar value and not increase it, we're going to mitigate the cliff in the future. So my personal preference would be to freeze it at the 2.58
Okay.
moving forward. That is me speaking for me. I do not know if that is what the company wants. So I'm just throwing that out there. So it's the assumption, and it would be one I'd be interested in having a discussion about.
why don't we table that and have that be a future discussion point?
Then I've got a follow-up.
Yeah, please.
I would like to have that be a future discussion point for sure. I think at our next meeting, I'm comfortable with the current use of free cash. At our next meeting, I'd like to see those projections with that frozen and maybe both. So
And see what
compare
we
and
look like.
contrast. And I think I'd like to see the budgets out to FY '27. Just if we know there's a big expense coming up, I just want to Emily's point, I think we've done a phenomenal job being fully transparent. I want to make sure we continue to do that. So if we know there's a big hit in 2027, I know you need budget guidance. The last thing I want to do is give you guidance and then in the meeting say, take it away. But I also think we need all the information. So, yeah.
I think I only increased it to get us to 3%, which is a typical budget. But at the same time, and thinking that we're
Yeah.
having some rough couple of years, I would guess it's going to be a couple of years of at least of the economy not being so great. And, so I guess that was my thought process, but obviously we take our cues from you and what your comfort is.
And I actually hear that, but I would be loath to communicate that, oh, we're gonna have a 3% budget next year, except regeneration didn't happen because we've changed some of our methodology.
Yeah, exactly.
And now we can't do it. I'd rather sort of say, hey, if we do all of this, we're looking at a 2.7 budget.
Yeah,
Maybe it's
exactly.
better, we hope it's better, but let's look at it eyes wide.
Yeah, so you can see what it would look like if I left that number stable. That's a fair.
Thank you. Thank you,
No,
Mr. Chair.
no, it's good. I appreciate that. And I think that in order to really kind of explore that topic, I think we need that analysis to be able to.
Agree completely.
Yeah, to inform that.
I haven't even figured out if it's an issue or not, but I'd like to see the numbers.
Yep.
I
Go ahead, Joe.
promise I won't comment on the topic. I'll just talk about things that would be helpful to discussing later. So I'm looking at my free cash projection spreadsheets that you shared earlier. I don't know if you have an updated one of those by any chance, but if we are going to discuss this topic specifically, if we could get an updated, whatever the latest version, even if it hasn't changed. since
This one where
October.
it gives you all the details, yeah.
Right,
Right,
because I think actually looking at that, I have my own version of that where I fiddled with it and I did a version that had constant in absolute terms. I did another version that was constant in 3%.
I
As you
think
might
that was the
expect, we run out of
intention.
money faster with the 3%.
Exactly.
So if there's anything else that needs to be updated that would make that analysis even more correct, that'd be great.
Joe, did you put regeneration into your model at all?
Yeah, that was one of the
I think that's one of the ones.
one of
that
the variables of
Karen started with.
yeah, of do we assume the generation increases by 3%? Do we assume it's 2 million in absolute terms forever? Do we assume that it's based on the last 10 years of regeneration, or maybe skip the last 3 because they were weird and the 10 before that? There's a lot of different options, and it's, I personally like playing with all of them because it gives me an idea of what is the space of possibilities. And
That's the
and-
intent of the spreadsheet, just to give it a tool for you guys to play with, to,
Yep.
coming to a meeting to say,
see
what would I
what-
feel comfortable with? It gives you kind of the ability to play with it a bit.
Thank you.
I will give you an updated one. Thank you.
Awesome.
This future agenda items is a little bit out of order, but since we're on it, any other ideas from the committee as far as other things that we want to place on a future agenda? I mean, we'll have enough because we have budget stuff in front of us anyway, so I just didn't, I want to make sure that we explore that one.
I wanted to confirm we have a future meeting February 22nd, so that's during school vacation week. I just want to confirm that was what I'm not going to be away, but that was what our intent was.
February 22nd is our next meeting.
So we typically don't meet until the budgets are in front of you, right? And that's typically the first week in March.
Okay, so we don't have one.
So we, last year we did Wednesday, March 2nd, the schools came, Wednesday, March 9th was, the towns basically, then Tuesday, March 15th, the following week, the remainder of the town, and then the Wednesday was optional, but we.
This is a holding spot.
Yeah, it was just a holding spot. So basically 4 meetings in March.
Okay, so nothing in February, because I'd seen that in I'm looking at the town page under boards. I
Yep.
just wanted to.
Yep.
That was just a,
It was just a placeholder in case we needed.
okay. That's good to know.
Do we maybe need a February meeting to look at some of these?
Up to you.
I don't know the answer to that.
And if we do, can we do it before school vacation?
Vacation week wouldn't be the best.
I feel strongly we should not do it during school vacation week. If we do it, definitely not then. I don't think it's a bad idea to.
Well, then there's the
personally.
20, there's the, something, I feel like something's happening the 25th. There's the 25th, which is after it. Because, oh no, wait a minute. I'm looking at, I'm looking,
Come on.
sorry, I'm looking at January. Yeah, no.
Yeah, no, school vacation week is. coming.
15th, I won't be here because I have a conflict, but you guys can still meet. The 15th is before, and 20, this is just what the FinCom page said was the 22nd.
The 15th doesn't, I'm not available on the 15th either.
Sound good. I could do it, but if no one else can, forget it.
The 8th.
I could do the.
Yeah, you can celebrate my birthday.
Is that your birthday?
Yeah.
Oh,
Way to spend
I'll
your
bring
birthday.
cupcakes. Bring cake, yeah, I'll absolutely. No, someone should bring cake for you. I'll bring cake.
We'll bring spreadsheets.
I will be remote.
February 8th, is that what we're talking about?
We said February 8th.
Well, this is just, we're adding things for future topics before budget. Yeah, so it's gotta be.
Right.
There's the 1st, the 8th, and the 15th.
I mean, the thing is too, we could also do this, we could do this as part of a March meeting.
Yeah.
That's true.
So you got 4 of them.
That's
So
true.
Is March 1st the first one then?
That'll be the first one, and it's typically the schools coming in before.
Yeah, I mean, the schools aren't that, and the schools aren't that important, so I mean, we could probably. do
nice.
this. We could do this.
Real nice.
They're not watching.
They're voting by January 31st, so they're done by then.
Yeah, but
I can be comfortable with March 1st, but my preference would be this is the first agenda item. I'd actually like to do this before we hear from the schools.
Yeah.
Because this
Yeah.
is sort of more overview.
I do think, I agree with that.
yeah, no, I think that's a good idea.
It's a little bit like, we've already spent the money, now let's figure out how much we had. Nope, that's right.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, I think that might be the better, instead of trying to shoehorn maybe something too early. If we do something in the beginning of February, how much of that are we gonna retain by the time we meet them in
You don't
March?
have to talk me out of a second meeting. I'm fine waiting till March 1st.
That sounds good. All right, so,
Works for everyone.
yeah, and we already have them.
So the school's gonna be there that day, so you want me to be here to do that, to start the whole thing up, right? Okay.
That would be great.
So it'll be Wednesday, March 1st, then the town first round, Wednesday, March 8th. And then the following week, on the 15th, and hopefully we'll be done by then, but then if not, we would have the 22nd.
We have the 22nd as another one. Okay. Yep, that's perfect.
The 1st, 8th, 15th.
Can you just review? The 1st is the schools, the 8th would be town.
Town,
The 8th
town
and the
part
15th.
one,
Yeah.
yeah, town part one, town part two is on the 15th.
Got it, thank you.
And when does the warrant close for Springtown meeting? Is that by the end of February or
By
something?
the end of February.
There wouldn't be any additional, other than the budget, financial articles for us that we know of.
One thing I don't know if I mentioned that I should mention is the retirement board has an article that will need to go to April town meeting. Apparently, they're allowing a 5% COLA for retirees for the 1 year only, but it has to be approved by town meeting. I don't have numbers about what that's gonna cost, but be prepared to get a request for that. You know, that will be something you'll need to vote on for April town meeting.
Oh, so
I don't have any information on what it costs necessarily at this point. We're getting the actuary to put together numbers, but for 1 year only, instead of doing the 3% or 4% COLA that we had available to us, they're allowing us to do 5% with a town meeting approval. Just because of the rough economic times.
Otherwise, we typically, our articles for April are light.
right, just the budget.
Yeah.
But that would be one.
When would we discuss the articles, any articles we do need to vote on?
In those meetings in March.
Meetings in
So-
March.
So last year, you voted on town meeting warrants after the budget was presented.
Okay,
Because
right,
that's-
so third,
Is the most
or
important.
if
It
necessary,
could be the 15th or the 22nd.
got it.
We have to get out of here in 5
We have to get out of here in 6 minutes. Jeffrey, you stole my thunder, so we need to do two.
Motion to,
Two sets of,
Nice
What I'm
try.
looking at for
Yeah.
for maybe the first two, kind of a reconciliation where we are against capital projects.
Yep.
Because some got opera funds and just kind of a reconciliation and
Reconciliation of what, I'm sorry, I didn't-
capital projects where, you know, what,
like an overview, I'm trying to.
yeah, we had the whole list of what, just where we're at, what got opera money, what's still out there.
But what got ARPA money for capital?
Well, just
just our
what's still
capital
out there.
projects in general and where we
Yeah.
are with them, as far as what we've allocated and where we are on the plan.
So just a copy of the capital plan with sort of what's funded.
But it's
what
changed
mechanism.
since we.
Yeah, exactly, just
Well, that's
updated.
gonna, isn't that part of the budget anyway?
It is part of the budget, yeah.
Well, there's stuff that's not funded though. Yeah.
That
too.
Unfunded is part of the, but there's like this little
Yeah.
section in the
Yeah,
budget. with
operating versus
unfunded.
capital.
Kind of stuff down below that we don't have a, yeah,
Not the
a box of, I'm not sure what we're doing here, where this money's gonna come
Bull-
from.
The bullpen of projects.
I can-
We just, we stuff everything and then we don't. All right.
You're looking for a motion, Mr.
Yeah,
Chair?
I am looking for motions. The first one is,
Move to approve the minutes dated October 19th, 2022.
Second.
Second,
too late, Emily, but we'll let you vote first.
yes.
Mary Ann,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Jean,
Yes.
Jeffrey,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Ed, yes, that's 8-0.
Other Joe.
Oh, McDonough, sorry, Joe. Go ahead, Joe McDonough.
It goes.
Now we're 8-0. I probably should ask if anyone had any discussion on that beforehand, but we're on a time crunch, folks.
You can do it for this set. Move
Yes.
to approve the minutes dated October 26th, 2020. 2020.
2020.
No.
I feel like it should be 2022.
I think you're right on
I'm
that.
guessing,
That is, because that was the financial forum. That was the one I came.
So-
sounds like a typo.
I have an amendment to the
Yes.
minutes. I amend them to read October 26th, 2022. If everyone agrees that's a friendly amendment, we can move forward as friendly amended by Jean.
So moved. Any discussion? Oh, I need a second.
Second,
Sorry, Emily, you gotta be quicker. Joe, thank you. Any discussion? All right, we'll go to the vote. Joe McDonough,
Yes.
Emily,
yep.
Mary Ann,
Yep.
Mark,
Yes.
Jean,
Yes.
Jeffrey,
Abstain. I was not there.
Yes.
Joe Carnian,
Yes.
Ed will abstain as well. I wasn't there either. So 6-0 that passes.
Do we have to vote on this budget change or no?
No, we do not.
just have-
No, this was
be informed
information
about
only.
it? Okay.
So with 3 minutes to spare, Jean.
Move to adjourn.
Second,
There you go, Emily. I'm giving it to Emily this time. All right, Emily.
Yep.
Joe McDonough.
Yes.
Perfect. Here. Mary Ann,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Jean,
Yes.
Jeffrey,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Ed. Yes, 8-0, we are adjourned.
We're all anxious. Sweck is anxious to get in here.
thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Emily.